This video is an introduction of how to use Rhino 6 for renderings. You can use the conventional renderer, you can use sunlight, you can use skylight or artificial lights. You can also show the dimensions in your visualizations or renderings and also the edges. You can also integrate background pictures, panoramas, and integrate this in your environment. You can also use the new Cycle GPU renderer, which gives really nice results if you have a fast graphic card. And you can also just use technical drawings, for example, like this wireframes drawings, or if you want to have it at a different quality, just use Make 2D to get to results like this. Okay, let's start. If you want to create visualizations, then the first thing I recommend is that you use under Save Frame this field Show Save Frame in Active View, because this guarantees that at the end of the day you know what kind of final visualization you get, what kind of proportions you have, so it's the same size, or in this frame you see the same size like your final result of your visualization. This video is not about a material, but it definitely makes sense to give your object a nice material. I just select my object and I just say in the property setups under materials, I go on material, and I don't want to use the layer material. I just go into use a new material, and then I have a long list of options which I can choose, and yeah, I just choose plastic, which is fine. I'll just give it a color, for example like this, orange, look, whatever. And I just think about transparency is fine, reflectivity, that's a little bit too much. I don't want to have a really glossy option. I want to have it a little bit frosted, reflectivity up. You can already see in the preview. Bump texture, probably I choose some dots and we just see the final result in my visualization. And if you then change in your viewport setting with this little triangle here from shaded view to rendered view, then you can already see the result. In Rhino 6 you have two nice options of how to create a rendering. You can do it while you're real-time viewport rendering. You just go into this pull-down menu and just choose capture, and you can say capture to clipboard, and then you can copy it into something, or you just go into capture to file, and you have different kind of settings, resolution, and things like this. We talk about this later. Or you can also go into your render settings here in the right menu. This is more the traditional way, and there are a lot of options. We will also talk about this a little bit later. And if you set this up all properly, you just go into render and it will open this kind of render menu, and it will be the traditional standard rendering in Rhino. I think that most of the times you do your basic settings in your rendering menu, and then you just use the viewport renderer. You can just see what kind of options you have. You can use it for wireframe rendering, and obviously if I go into capture to file, then you just save it as your wireframe. You can choose shaded view, you can use rendered view, which is really fast. You can use ghosted, you can use X-ray, and important to me, you can use technical. Technical sometimes is quite handy for yeah, for these kind of technical visualizations. You also have other options. Artistic, not really interesting for me. Pen could be interesting. Arctic, not interesting. And really important is the ray traced view, and the ray traced view is new, and it's based on a GPU cycle renderer. If you have a fast graphic card, then this is a really good option to get really nice visualizations. We talk about this cycle mode a little bit later. I want to stop this. You can see my mouse, and there's something like a play and pause button. I just go on pause, and this is how you stop the process of your visualization. You can already see the dotted elements I set up in my material. I just go into my settings again, and I just choose now technical, and I want to show you very few things. Every setting of your display mode has settings you can change. If I go into options, you can see that the Wino options will open. You can go into views and you can go into display modes, and we just play a little bit now with our technical settings. In our technical settings, you can see that you can choose the background, and for example just say you want to have a solid color, for example like white. Makes sense. Can also do it for black. You can have a ground plane and have the same like in your render settings, which is set up here, which also makes sense. There are also other things you can do. You can say show curves on or show edges, and you just see what is happening. Show silhouettes, show creases, and hidden lines. Let's switch this off, and so you can see that you can design your settings. You can also just say that you want to have the basic grid in the background, or the grid axis and world axis. So there are a lot of options already in your technical view, shadows and things like this. Just figure it out. Makes sense to be aware of this. One thing about technical drawings, if you save them and make a visualization out of this, sometimes can happen that the lines are quite thin and it's difficult to adjust this. So it's in this case better to make a make 2D projection and just then be able to work with the thickness of the lines. I can just show you how to do this. Okay, I have my model. I can change it, for example, now to a shaded view. Anyhow, I have it selected. I just enter in my command line make 2D. Okay, here we go. And I want to have it from the perspective, and I want to have the view from input object. And here you can also choose what you want to see. The hidden lines probably I don't want. I want to have the scene silhouette and things like this. It creates its own layer. By the way, I activate hidden lines, and it creates its own layer. Okay, here we go. Just take some seconds. And after calculation my make 2D, I just change to my top view. By the way, double click and double click on my top view. And if I now look into my layer manager, you can see a layer, make 2D, and you can still switch on and off, for example, like the hidden lines, the curves and the silhouette. These are all things you can still adjust. But by default, these are all print width for printing. Because of performance reasons, you don't see it in your viewport, and then you also will not see it in your visualization. So you have to switch this feature on. Just go into the pull-down menu and just say print view and rendered. And then you can already see that it changed. If I just change my scene silhouette curves to another thickness like 1 millimeter, then you can see the difference. If you want to save it as a transparent visualization and you are just in rendered now, then you just have to go into your option menu, and under rendered you just change the background, and instead of use render settings you just go into transparent. Okay, here we go. And if you want to save this for working in Photoshop, whatever, you just open your view capture again. You go into just see what you want to change. Transparent background I also want to change. Want to save? I'm sorry, and you just call it transparent and as a PNG. And I save this. And here we go. This is what it looks like in Photoshop. I can just add a new layer, and this layer, for example, will get a color. Just change the color, whatever, somehow like this, and I will fill this layer and put the layer underneath. Okay, and also good to know, If you, for example, don't have a transparent layer, you just have something like this. There's one nice trick in Photoshop. You can just go to this layer with this white background, and in your settings you go in Richtung Multiply, Multiplizieren, then you have the same result, then it makes it transparent, so it not even has to be a PNG with transparency. If the background is white, you work with this Multiplizieren, Multiply, and then everything underneath will show when your lines are on top. Okay, I toggle again to my perspective with Control and Tab, and I have my perspective. This I just want to delete, and I also switch off my print view because it just takes render time. And good to know for all these settings, for example, like rendered. There are a lot of options to control what we already did. We changed the background from transparent to, for example, like a gradient. Now I have a gradient of 4 different colors. There are many other options. There's probably one thing worth showing. The normal rendered view is done with your non-real-time renderer. There's a new renderer, it called Cycles. If you switch this on, then it will change to the new GPU cycled renderer. It's the same like when what you find in your pull-down menus ray trace. So at the end of the day, the whole thing is just a setup, and you see that you can change the name of the setup, and you have a lot of flexibilities in working on this. And when we next talk about this ray tracing, it's also interesting in your Rhino options to see everything under the menu Cycles. I just open this right now, and what you can see my graphic card. It's a GeForce GTX 780. If you have a GeForce graphic card, it really makes sense to use this ray trace cycles option. If you don't have it, then you just visualize with your CPU. I can change it. This is your hardware CPU, it's not the graphic card, and I really recommend to use your CUDA. If you have a graphic card like this, then it makes absolutely sense to use this kind of display rendering. Otherwise, I would just go to the conventional one. And if you have changed anything, and for example, I changed things in my rendered setup, you can see that this is blue. It shows it blue. And if I go into restore defaults, you can also see what you changed. Then it goes off again, and you have your completely normal default setting, which you had at the beginning when you opened Rhino. Before we want to have a look at this rendering menu, I just want to talk about this new function, this ray traced rendering. If I just change ray trace, you can just see that it slowly pumps up, and at the beginning it's quite crisp, and it becomes more and more clean. And you can see the samples. Now it's 40 samples, this is 50 samples, already quite good, and it just goes up to 100 samples, 500 samples, 1000 samples, and you can see that it takes a long time. But you can also see that we set up in our materials this plastic material with these dots, and it's the only view where you can really see this. The future is that your viewport will always work like this, but this is definitely not acceptable. What I do is I just go into the viewport, and I change this little thing to pause, and now it's stopped at 175 at my recommendation. If you want to have a low quality, change the samples to 4. If you want to have a draft viewport thing, change it to 20 samples. If you want to have okay quality of your visualization, go to 100. If you want to have a high quality, go to 500 samples. But if I look at the presets of Rhino, and I just open the presets of Rhino and I go into cycles, you can see that the preset samples is 1000. This is absolutely too much. This takes a long time. So just for my draft, I would always recommend to have the max of 500, and I just change it to let's change it to 20, and let's see if we are already happy about this. I just say 20. I change it once to rendered, and I go back to ray traced, and here we go again. And hopefully it will finish at 20, and I think this is already good. This was very few seconds, 6 seconds, and it changed. If you turn it, it goes back to your normal render view, and if I just hold it, it goes up again to 20, and I'm not really sure if I want to work on this on a regular basis, so normally I just use my rendered view. But if I want to make a visualization out of this, then the quality is really good. I just go into capture to file, and in my resolution I, for example, go to a size of HDTV, and I just choose this times my number of passes, like 100, and say okay. I save this as technical drawing ray trace 100 samples. Okay, and now it's calculating, and it takes some time. And after 1 minute render time on my computer, the result of 100 samples looks like this. I think pretty cool. You can still see some crisp surface here. And I also did a rendering with 500 passes, and you can hardly see the difference. There is a difference, obviously. And the 500 passes took 5 minutes. The 100 passes took 1 minute. And if you go back to our viewport, the 20 passes takes 5 seconds. So I think if you have complex scenes, you definitely don't want to go to the default 1000 passes. It will never finish on our computers. You will probably be fine with 100 passes or less. Okay, the last thing, we want to have a look at our rendering menu. I just change again to our normal rendered view because I think this is a little bit faster. And we just go into renderer, and you can see under current renderer you can choose the Rhino renderer, and on my computer I don't have any other renderer installed. And interestingly, you also can't select the new cycle renderer. You can only do it while real-time viewport rendering. The next thing is you can choose the view, like the current viewport, or you can just say specific viewport, and then you can select what kind of viewport you want to choose without changing the viewport here. It's just about the visualization. The next thing you can do is the resolution and the quality. Viewport really is a clear thing. It just depends on the viewport, and you can also see that my show save frame is just following. But if you go to, for example, like an HDTV format, then you can see that my show save frame makes absolutely sense. You see these two arrows left and right, and if I increase my viewport somehow like this, then you can see, I just select it again, that it fits. And now here again it does not work because my viewport is not big enough. I can just make this window a little bit smaller, and now it should fit. Nearly. Okay, now it fits. Okay, so this is about the dimension, and you can also lock this size. So if you, for example, want to make it smaller but you like the dimension and you locked it, then you can also see that X and Y are following. This makes really sense that you only, for example, think in your final resolution, but some test visualizations you just make really small. Dots per inch is not really interesting for me. That's more like a Photoshop thing. Dwarfed for quality, this is all about the conventional renderer. I would go via the ray trace rendering if you have a fast graphic card in your laptop or in your computer. So we keep it like this. Then you have different kind of options regarding the backdrop. You can choose a solid color. For example, why not gray? Can look really good. You can choose a gradient, and you can define the colors of the gradient. You can go for a 360 degree environment map, and I just open this pull-down menu and just say use an environment, import from environment library, and it can be any picture. And here are just some pictures I can already use, so I just use the first one and just go into open. It takes a while until my back picture is refreshed, and you can see that you have now this environment at your back. It doesn't look really convincing now because I didn't put much effort into choosing the right background and how to position it. I'm pretty sure about that we quickly find much better options. Why not just using the Rhino Studio? Takes a while again, and now I'll zoom. Also not really convincing, but you will figure it out by yourself. You can use wallpaper, and with wallpaper we don't see anything right now because you have to load a wallpaper, and that's also something different than just a picture at the background. I go into View Properties, and under File Name Wallpaper you just choose a wallpaper, for example like one of our visualizations we did, and now you can see there's an overlay of our wallpaper and visualization. If I zoom out and in, there you can see it's a different thing than just adding a picture in my backdrop. Okay, going back to our rendering menu again, stretch to fit. Also should try that it fits to your visualization. It was no issue right now because the size of my visualization and this was similar. Anyhow, you can use a transparent background, and I go back to my gradient or my solid color, and interestingly I still have my back wallpaper and my scene. So what I do is go again into my viewport options, and I just delete my settings, and I just go back again, and now you see that my wallpaper is gone. Okay, ground plane, you can switch on and off your ground plane, which is really good for visualization because then you can already see a shadow underneath your object. So I always would recommend working with a ground plane if these are objects like this. It's a little bit like your own little studio. You can choose environments for your studio, and this is also something you can play with and figure out by yourself. What's really interesting for us, we just use Rhino for basic visualizations. We are right now not working with V-Ray, just basic visualizations, but you have the options to switch on sun. And the sun is really good because you get a really clear shadow, and you always have this basic skylight. If you don't have it, the whole scene doesn't look good anymore, so I would just keep it like this. And interesting for you is looking at your sun settings. I just open the sun settings, and you have the option between sun options manual, and you just change it by date, time, or you just use the manual control. What I want to do is I just use the automatic settings, and first good to know is never orient your sun to the object, always orient the object to the sun because you want to work in orthogonal mode. So when I change this, for example, you can see that I turn the position of the sun. You can also see that the shadow is actually turning. So you just have to see from where's the north side of your plot of land, and then adjust it to your object. I can't do any changes here because I went on sun options not manual. If you switch on manual, you can do it manually, but I don't want to do this right now. I just go into my date and time, and you can see that you can change the year. And you can see that you can also enter the year. You can see now I'm in April, now I'm in May, I'm in July and in August, things like this. You can change the time from the morning. You can already see that it gets a little bit like more like a warm color and a cold color. And also here you can enter the exact time you want to have. These are things you can do. And you can also choose, really important, the location. Under location, you already have a selection of places you can choose. You can also just choose it in this map, just clicking with your mouse. And now I'm already in Italy, and then also direction of Germany. And you can also just search for a location, or just enter the latitude or the longitude value. And if I just enter, for example, Mainz in the internet, you can see that the longitude value is 8.2, and the latitude is 49. And if you enter these values, then you have the precise data files of your location. Under lights, you can see all your lights. I have a skylight, I have a sunlight. You can also obviously add artificial lights. You find them in your render toolbar, spotlights, point lights, directional lights. We're not talking about this right now. And the last thing I would like to have a look at is this wireframe mode. For example, if you just activate render dimensions and text, and if I, for example, add a dimension in my visualization, somewhere like this, then you can also have this in your visualization, and you just have to activate it, or you can also render your edges and your curves. I just enter curves and we just switch on rendering. I just control my size, and locked window I have activated. For me it's a little bit too big, so I just scale my visualization down to 800 pixels. I click on rendering and we can see that the conventional normal render menu is open. I can also see that I made a mistake because I obviously still have transparent activated. I'll just stop this. I go up again, and transparent background I just switch off. I don't want this, and I go again into render. Looks much better, like I expected. You can, by the way, always stop your rendering, obviously. And after a really long time of several minutes, you can just see the final result. That's also why I don't really want this kind of rendering method. For me, it just takes much too long. Ray tracing or other programs like Ray are much faster. But you can see that's the final result, and at the end of it, it will just add your dimensions. And if you go into post effects, you can also see that you can switch, for example, like your annotations off, and if you would have rendered your curves, and you would also be able to do this, and also some other settings. You can just play with this. I definitely don't want this noise. And also good to know is if you have several visualizations, you can just clone this window, and if you're happy with this, you just save it. Different kind of options as a JPEG, for example, as a HDR file with all the information in it. So there are different kind of options, or as a PNG. The interesting thing about this menu, even if you can't choose your real-time ray trace renderer here, if I just change in my pull-down menu to ray trace, then you can see that it just uses all the settings. It uses the daylight system, it just uses your annotation dimensions, everything is there. This was a quick preview, and if I just do my visualization with capture and capture to file, then you can see that everything is a part of this, the light and the dimensions. So my recommendation is, if you want to have a great visualization, use 100 number of passes, so it doesn't take too long. Go and use your ray trace visualization. Just use this for a basic setup. Okay, this is what it looked like before I did my settings in terms of sunlight and background, and this is what it looks like when I set up all my rendering menus, and I think this is really good, and thanks for watching.